Today's lesson is on absolute value equations. And earlier in the year, we talked about how absolute value means distance from zero. And the key idea here is that distance can't be negative. You can't walk negative 2 blocks to school or ride your bike negative 2 miles to school, right? So if we look at 4 and negative 4, even though one's going to the right and one's going to the left, to get to 4, we have to go 1, 2, 3, 4 units. And if you wanted to think about it like blocks, we could think we're walking 4 blocks. But to get to negative 4 from 0, you're also going 1, 2, 3, 4. You're still going 4 units. And that's why 4 and negative 4 have the same absolute value, and that absolute value is 4. It's just the distance. It doesn't matter if you're going right or left. It's just asking how far are you going. All right, so absolute value, just think how far. And that question can't be negative. The answer, to that question can't be negative. So how do we write that? Well, this little thing means absolute value. So that's showing me the absolute value of 4 is 4. And the absolute value of negative 4 is also 4 because they are both 4 units away from 0. All right, so now how do we apply that to an absolute value equation? So what you're really asking yourself is, what value could x be? And what goes inside there? Well, just remember, these symbols, the absolute value symbol, is going to turn it positive, right? Because whatever's in there, we're going to take the distance. We're going to take that positive value. So what that means is that x in this case could actually be, x could be 2, but x could also be negative 2, right? Because if we took a 2 and we placed it inside those parentheses, right? Inside the absolute value signs, we'd get 2. But if we put a negative 2 in there, it would also come out as 2, right? The absolute value of 2 is 2. But the absolute value of negative 2 is also positive 2. So in this case, we have 2 solutions. X could be 2 or x could be negative 2. And the key thing to keep in mind here is that absolute value equations are always going to have 2 possible answers because whatever is inside there could be positive or negative. Let's keep that in mind. We're always going to have 2 possible answers. So again, what could be inside there? Well, it could be a 7, but it could also be a negative 7. So x could be 7 or x could be negative 7. And again, we have 2 possible answers. But what are we going to do over here when we have more than just an x inside? Well, what we need to remember is that this whole thing could be 7, but it could also be negative 7. So again, I'm going to write that out. This whole thing, x plus 2, could be 7, but it could also be negative 7. Because if it's negative 7, and we take the absolute value of it, we still get 7. So now we need 2 equations, because there's always going to be 2 possible solutions. So I'm going to solve for this one, minus 2, and I get x equals 5. And let's just check that out. So if we did this, if we said x is 5, what we're saying is the absolute value of 5 plus 2 equals 7. 5 plus 2 is 7. The absolute value of 7 is 7, and that's true. Okay? But now we're saying that x plus 2, whatever is inside, could also be negative 7. So let's solve that. Well, I'm still going to minus 2, and I have x equals negative 9. Well, that looks different. Let's plug it in and see if it works. We have the absolute value of negative 9 plus 2 equals 7. Negative 9 plus 2 is negative 7 equals 7. And that's also true because remember, whatever is inside, it could be 7, but it could also be negative 7. So what you're looking for in this answer is what are the x values that make what's inside there 7 equals 7? And those answers are 5 and negative 9. So again, you get 2 solutions. You got 2 solutions here, you get 2 solutions here. And the way we find them is by setting up our 2 equations. So let's do a couple more examples. Okay, so here, x minus 6 equals 12. So remember, what that means is x minus 6 might be equal to 12. But x minus 6 might also be equal to negative 12 because the absolute value then would be positive. So let's check that out. We have 2 equations we need. X minus 6 might be equal to 12. And if I want to solve this, I'm just going to go plus 6, x equals 18. Right here, I'm going to check that work, and I'm going to say, okay, well, if x is 18, 18 minus 6, and what's the absolute value of that? it's 12, and the absolute value of 12 is 12. Yeah, that's true, so that works. So I know that x is 18 is a possible solution. But remember, x minus 6 could also be negative 12. Because if this is 12, right, if this in here is negative 12, then the absolute value of that is still going to be 12, and that's why this is also going to work. So let's just check that out. I'm going to add 6, and I get x equals negative 6. Let's see if that works. So the absolute value of x is negative 6 now. So negative 6 minus 6 equals 12. Negative 6 minus 6 is negative 12 equals 12. Yeah, that's true. The absolute value of negative 12 is 12. And so that means x is negative 6 is another solution. And again, I have 1, 2 solutions. Let's make up one even a little bit more challenging, and we'll end there. So let's say, instead of what we just had, let's say that 2x minus 6, the absolute value of that equals 12. Now again, the thing to remember is that this might be 12, but this might also be negative 12. So I'm going to start by just writing those two equations. 2x minus 6 might be 12, but there's one other value it could be, and that's negative 12. 2x minus 6 could be negative 12, because remember, whatever is inside the absolute value signs, whatever is inside here, could either be 12 or negative 12. So now let's solve those two separate equations. Plus 6, 2x equals 18. Okay, but I don't want 2x, I just want x. I'm going to divide by 2, and I get x equals 9. So let's just solve the other one too, and then we'll go back and check them both. So same idea here. I'm going to say plus 6. So I get 2x equals negative 6, and then I'm going to divide by 2. Divide by 2, and I get x equals negative 3. So again, what we're saying is the answers are 9 and negative 3. Let's plug them both in, make sure that they both work. So over here, I'm going to say 2 times 9 minus 6, remember we're taking the absolute value of all of that, equals 12. Well, 2 times 9 is 18, so we have 18 minus 6. 18 minus 6 is 12, so the absolute value of 12 equals 12. Yeah, that's true, so that works. So 9 is an answer. Now let's plug in negative 3 and see if it still works. We have 2 times negative 3 minus 6. We're taking the absolute value of that whole thing, equals negative 12. Let's see. Well, we want to see if the absolute value equals 12. So 2 times negative 3 is negative 6 minus 6, right, equals 12. Negative 6 minus 6 is negative 12. The absolute value of that is 12. So sure enough, we get two answers, and it's 9 and negative 3, because those are the two numbers that if we plug them in here, right, for x, this whole thing would be equal to 12.